Join us on an investigative journey as we educate each other on a scientific discovery, concept, or phenomenon.
Then we'll take a dive into the complex and misleading world of pseudoscience to sort the factual from the fabricated.
I'm Matt McCabe.
And I'm Levi Bateman.
And this is IdioFacto. Gentlemen, I have just been given a small bottle of organic kombucha by Phoebe.
Wow.
I am going to read the label to you just firstly. It says...
Yeah, do it.
Strands of the kombucha may appear. These are signs of a natural, healthy, and raw kombucha. I'm so nervous.
So the mushroom's still in there.
I'm
What's
going
it
to
called?
try
What's
it.
a weird word for it?
SCOBY.
SCOBY.
Which stands for symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast.
Yes. So this is
tasty.
handcrafted in small batches. What's so good about kombucha? Remedy Kombucha loves your guts. Our pure, authentic raw
Loves 'em.
kombucha is long-aged and naturally fermented. The result is a delicious drink that will make you feel great.
Well, I think I've had this particular brand of drink of kombucha, and it actually is delicious, but I can tell you what, it's not the kombucha that's making it delicious.
I'm going to try it now.
Oh.
Do it. What flavour have you got?
Ginger lemon.
Yeah, that does sound delicious.
Have you ever tried original flavour?
All right. I can't see any strands of
I've never tried it unflavoured original.
It's
No.
pretty gross.
Oh, it smells gross. Hang on. All right, I'll
Get
try
into
it.
it.
I'll try it.
Pinch your
Let
nose.
us know.
It doesn't taste bad, but it's also very boring.
A bit like cidery tea, hey?
It tastes like cidery ginger beer, but with less sugar and less ginger and a bit of lemon.
But think about the benefits to your guts.
It loves your guts.
It does
It
love my
loves them.
guts. It's certified organic raw kombucha, organic tea, organic green tea, organic black tea, organic ginger, naturally fermented organic glucose, organic lemon, organic I think they're really going for the organic angle here. Organic stevia. So it's not even sweetened with sugar, it's sweetened with stevia, which explains the sort of Diet Cokey aftertaste.
Right.
But I can't say that I like it, but it's not as disgusting as I thought it would be. How about that?
Well, you heard it here first, folks.
If that's not a recommendation, I don't know what is.
Turns out when you add a bunch of flavours to mushroomy water, it ends up not tasting as much like mushroomy water.
I promise that's the last time we'll talk about kombucha now. We have a guest today, Levi.
Yeah, our first guest. Episode 9 already.
Dr. Sam Laucirica. How are you, Sam?
Yeah, good guys. How are you guys?
Yeah, not too bad. It's exciting having someone else talking to us.
Long time listener, first time guest.
Oh, long time listener. Listen to every single episode you've ever produced. So it's pretty exciting to be on the show.
Hey, we're like famous and stuff now.
Oh, yeah.
We can say long time listener.
I think 8 episodes is enough to say a long time. That's 2 months.
The concept has been alive for probably a little bit longer than that.
Not a whole lot though. Anyway, it's good to have a different voice other than Levi's because I got pretty sick of his over the last few weeks. Hopefully you've got better puns.
Oh, Levi's? I would have thought maybe the other voice.
Oh,
That's right.
he's on it already. God.
If you ask Anne McCabe, I know which voice she prefers.
She hasn't actually listened to a full episode of the podcast yet. I kept asking her to listen. She's just listened to like excerpts. I told her that she's been mentioned and she still isn't interested. So thanks a lot, Anne. When you eventually hear this, like 3 years down the track, you'll know that we've been talking about you constantly.
Maybe we'll have to make her a guest. She does work for an immunologist.
Yeah, she's not an immunologist though.
No, I guess.
No. Sam, you're not an immunologist. What are you?
I'm a medical doctor, so fairly junior, only a couple of years out of uni. But
So you're dumb then. Forget it.
yeah, don't worry about it. I got nothing. So,
Yeah. Oh, we've chosen the wrong guest.
New guest.
but I can, write scripts and 6 certificates. So
All right, well, you're going to help Levi get through the pseudoscience behind supplements that a bit later on. But in the meantime, you're going to have to listen to me have a chat about microwaves.
no worries. I'll just sit back and enjoy.
It might be boring for now, but it'll sure heat up later on.
Oh, no. Look out. Here we go again.
Starting already.
Didn't take
See,
long.
Sam knows. Sam knows.
I love and hate
Sam,
it.
you've listened for many weeks, but now you can be part of the punny action.
Yeah, that's right. I got a few things lined up.
It's a love-hate relationship with Levi's puns.
But it only takes one to keep you hooked, though. One good one just keeps you going.
Exactly, yeah. There's never just one, though.
No.
It's like Lay's. You can't have just one.
No.
Anyway, microwaves. A microwave is the term for a specific band of electromagnetic radiation. So there are heaps of types of electromagnetic radiation. The most obvious one to us is visible light. So visible light's usually wavelengths between 400 and 700 nanometers. So really tiny. But if you can imagine a spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum, going from left to right, for example, on the very left-hand side, you've got extremely long wavelengths. You talked about ELF from submarines a couple of weeks ago, Levi.
That's right, yeah.
Extremely low frequency.
The low frequency is able to penetrate certain depths of water.
Yeah. So this extremely low frequency band, the wavelengths can be thousands of kilometers long.
Wow.
Which is ridiculous. But an electromagnetic wavelength can be theoretically as long as the universe itself.
Yeah, okay.
Then as you move from left to right along the spectrum, you steadily decrease in wavelength size. You go from extremely low frequency to super low frequency to ultra low frequency. Eventually you get to very high frequency and ultra high frequency radio waves, which most people would be familiar with. You hit the visible light spectrum at about 700 nanometers. So the visible light spectrum has shorter wavelengths than infrared, and then you've got red light, and then you've got the visible light spectrum all the way up to violet light at about 400 nanometers. Then you've got ultraviolet light, and then you get into the ionizing radiation, which is the super, super, super short wavelengths. So anything with a longer wavelength than visible light is non-ionizing radiation, and anything with a shorter wavelength than visible light is ionizing radiation, which means the photons in those wavelengths have enough energy to cause chemical reactions in cells, for example. And so this kind of radiation can lead to radiation sickness like DNA damage and cancer.
Okay, so no sort of radio waves are ionizing radiation. All radio waves are non-ionizing.
That's correct. So everything with a longer wavelength than visible light, so microwaves, radio waves, ultra high frequency, very high frequency, all the way down to super low frequency and ultra low frequency and extremely low frequency. All of these are non-ionizing radiation, so they're not harmful just because the energy is so low in them.
So what are some examples of ionizing radiation that we use?
Ultraviolet, X-rays, gamma rays, they're all ionizing radiation.
Okay.
So you get gamma rays from nuclear reactors and things like that. X-rays, obviously, we use to see inside the body. Sam, you'd be familiar with those?
Yeah, so there is a bit of, as you're saying, the sickness associated with it. So there has been shown to be a link between cancer and radiation exposure. Usually with X-rays, it takes a whole lot of X-rays, but CT scans, basically, in most simple terms, the way a CT works is it just takes a whole heap of X-rays in sequence. So you can look at something in from different dimensions. So,
right.
Yeah.
So you're exposed to a whole lot of X-rays at one time.
Yeah, yeah.
Because with that sort of radiation, it's not so much about the magnitude of exposure, it's more about the length of time that you're exposed to them.
Yeah.
So I imagine that's why you get such a big dose with a CT scan, is because you're exposed to X-rays for a longer period of time than you would just to take one photo, say, of your chest.
Yeah, that's right. And that risk actually, is a risk that occurs over time in your body as well. So, like, especially with kids or with young adults, we do weigh up that risk of radiation sickness with the need for the scan. Whereas in an elderly person, like, the chance of them developing a cancer from that radiation exposure is quite low.
Yeah, compared to their overall risk anyway.
That's
from
right.
Just being old.
Yeah. So it is actually something that we take into consideration, whereas ultrasound and MRI don't have any radiation exposure. So,
right.
Yeah. But each medium is used for different things.
So there isn't one particular definition for what the microwave band is, but it usually describes wavelengths of between 1 meter and 1 millimeter. So obviously longer wavelengths than visible light, and therefore that's non-ionizing radiation.
It's a pretty big range, though.
It is a massive range. The difference between microwave and radio wave is kind of arbitrary. And I mean, as with any continuum, the boundaries between what they're called is pretty arbitrary anyway. So radio waves and microwaves are basically the same thing, and therefore microwave frequencies are commonly used in everything from wireless communication to garage door openers. But the word microwave is most commonly used to describe the microwave oven. Everyone would be familiar with a microwave oven, and that's what I'm going to be focusing on.
Great.
So a microwave oven consists of three main parts. You've got a chamber, which is much like a Faraday cage. For those who know what a Faraday cage is,
I do not know.
it's irrelevant to go into now. Basically, it's just a cage that contains the microwaves in an isolated space. So that's one part. The second part is a waveguide, which directs the microwaves from the electronics that generate them towards the middle of the cage where the food is. And the final part is the microwave vacuum tube, which is called a magnetron.
That's excellent. I'm so glad it's called that. I've got one of those in my house.
Yes, most people have a magnetron in their kitchen. That's pretty cool.
Fantastic.
It sounds like a sci-fi bad guy, but, you know.
Or a torture device.
Yeah, actually, could be a torture device. Yeah. Microwave ovens were first introduced to consumers by a company called Tapan in 1955, and that followed the development of radar technology during World War II. But microwaves really only became widespread when they were made smaller and cheaper in the 1970s. The first ones were huge. They looked like full-sized ovens, basically. Microwave ovens are now ubiquitous. Pretty much every kitchen in the West has one. They work via a process called dielectric heating. So therefore they require substances to be relatively high in molecules that are electric dipoles. So that's water and fats and sugars and things like that.
Right, okay. Polar molecules.
Yeah. An electric dipole is a molecule that has a slight positive charge at one end and a slight negative charge at the other end. So as the radiation moves through the substance being heated, the molecules try and flip around and align themselves with the electric field, but as it goes past, the direction changes and they try and flip the other way. So they keep flipping around and around and around and around and around. And the frequency of microwaves is usually about 2.45 gigahertz, which means that the polarity of which way the molecule is being pulled changes 2.45 billion times per second.
Right, so it's that movement of the polar molecule that generates heat. So it's kinetic energy that's generating heat.
Yeah, so as they flip around, they bash into each other, and the friction of that vibration raises the temperature of the substance. So water has a much larger dipole movement than fats and sugars, and therefore microwaves are much more effective at cooking watery substances than they are fatty substances.
Okay.
However, microwaves can rarely attain temperatures much beyond the boiling temperature of water, so 100 degrees Celsius, unless there's a particularly high proportion of fat in the food. So fat takes longer to heat, but it can get to hotter temperatures. If there's a high proportion of water in the food, it rarely goes beyond 100 degrees. The whole system requires a substance like water to work, otherwise there's nothing to propagate the movement of the molecules in. So have you ever heard people say that microwave food doesn't taste as good as fried or oven baked or anything like that?
Yeah, I have. I think the most common complaint that I've heard about microwaves and the food that they're warming is that the food tends to get sort of sloppy rather than crispy like it does in an oven.
That's partly because of the need for water, and that water doesn't evaporate very much because the temperature doesn't get much beyond the boiling temperature, so it tends to hang around. Whereas if you're cooking in an oven, it gets to, 200 to 280 degrees, for example, which means that the water's more likely to evaporate. It's actually true that microwave food doesn't taste as good because boiling range temperatures don't induce the chemical reactions that are necessary for frying, for example, or browning food. So it won't taste as good as frying food or baking would.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
No, what about the old trick of putting a glass of water in with your pizza when you reheat it? Does that help? I've heard that helps.
Yeah, I can't see how that would help.
Never mind.
Because it would help it would heat the glass of water, wouldn't it?
It would heat, it would heat the glass of water, but that's about it. I don't really understand. Yeah, I can't really see how that would help you. Hey, it's editing, Matt. I'm just stopping here because I had a quick look around regarding this glass of water in the microwave conversation, and I didn't really get a really satisfactory answer, but turns out that it does actually make a difference if you put a glass of water in with your pizza, and it's got something to do with lowering the power of the microwaves that are released. Or you can just turn down the power in the microwave. That works too. Just wanted to add that turns out that there is actually a reason for putting a glass of water in, but I still can't really fathom what it is, but there you go. This might seem like a silly thing to say, but it's much easier to heat things in a microwave that are liquid and not frozen. Because if they're frozen, it's harder for the molecules to move around, basically. It's not just that they're frozen, it's actually harder for the molecules to move around, and therefore you have to wait until the ice defrosts before you start to get the proper movement of the molecules and generate enough heat. So mostly microwave cooking is pretty much exclusively used for reheating previously cooked meals. And your example of the pizza is one that I'm most familiar with, I'd say.
I've done it this weekend.
Most microwave-safe cookware is transparent to microwaves. So the containers themselves don't absorb any of the microwave energy and don't heat up. Any heat that's felt in those containers is indirectly introduced by the hot food and not by the microwaves.
Is it because those vessels don't contain a polar molecule?
Yes, that's right.
And they're therefore not affected by the radio wave?
Correct. So they're mostly plastics and glassware and things like that. So the molecules are not as polar as water or fat, for example.
Right.
Why does the glass ones get so hot compared to the plastic ones when you heat them in the microwave?
The glass is more conductive of heat than the plastic is. Yeah. So it's not actually introducing any heat. The microwave itself is not introducing any heat into the glassware. It's introducing heat into the water, and then the water is introducing the heat into the glass, and then the glass is conducting that heat better than the plastic would.
Cool.
Yeah. Most metals can't be used in microwaves.
That was my next question. Why do you get the big sparks?
Yeah, well, metal is a conductive object, and when it has any sharp points, so like any crumpled foil or prongs like on a fork, it basically acts as an antenna for the electric current coming from the magnetron. So where you have a magnetic field, you also have an electric field, and it basically says, "Come and attach to me, electric field," and creates an arc between the magnetron and the metal object itself. So in the most simple terms, it superheats the air around it, and then the air starts to act like a conductor. Sort of superheats the air to the point where you can propagate an electric current through the air and you get it arcing towards the metal object. And this often results in a runaway effect where it just keeps on sparking and sparking and sparking until eventually, if you haven't noticed, your microwave blows up or starts a fire. Or
So our foil and forks no good, but like a spoon would be fine because they're not sharp.
Yeah, it does have, so the edges of the spoon are probably sharp edges, sharp enough to cause some sort of arcing. It's the same with a knife. The cutting edge of a knife is probably sharp enough that it would be considered an edge. Most microwave-safe metals are tubular with rounded edges, and you could actually use aluminium foil because it's flat and the edges aren't thick enough to really conduct any electricity, but it's really hard to use aluminium foil without crumpling it and making sharp edges. So
right, yeah, okay. You
can see this most clearly if you were to microwave a CD. It shows really obvious electrical arcing. It looks like lightning bolts propagating through a CD.
It's pretty impressive. I've seen some videos of this.
So a guy named Steve Mould, I'll put a link in the show notes to Steve Mould's videos. He's microwaved a lot of things. It's like his thing. He's a really good science YouTuber, and he'd have to be with a name like Steve Mould.
That's right.
What else could you? That's a bit of nominative determinism for you there.
Sounds like a fun guy.
Wow.
Throwback.
There it is again. It's a recycled pun. But...
Yeah, you've used the same joke again. It's bad enough that you use terrible puns.
Worked the first time.
Well, I don't know. Anyway, stop embarrassing me in front of Sam.
Isn't that the sign of a comedic genius, the throwback jokes?
Sure is.
Is it a throwback joke or is it just a repetitive one? Because
Yeah, maybe just repetitive.
yeah,
Hey, look, we haven't received any complaints yet. If you do, if you've got a problem with my puns, please write to us, idiofacto@gmail.com. But look, I've received no complaints so far. I will continue. I can promise that.
great. That's excellent. So, what's the most dangerous part of using a microwave?
Burning your hands on the cheese that's melted on the pizza when you're taking it out.
What do you reckon, Sam?
Accidentally leaving the fork in there.
Well, both of those are a lot more dangerous than the main thing that people think.
Yeah, this is like a bit of a science and pseudoscience crossover, because I've actually been introduced to people who have a microwave in their house but won't use it for fear that it will irradiate their food, or at very least emit some sort of radiation that could cause cancer or tumour growth.
Yeah, like I said earlier, microwaves emit non-ionizing radiation. So it's not dangerous in the way that X-rays and gamma rays are. It means it won't damage your DNA and it won't give you cancer.
So that episode of South Park was a lie then?
I guess I have not seen
Surprisingly,
Oh.
yes.
That's unusual for South Park to be exaggerating the truth.
I won't have it.
So a leaking microwave is unusual, but it can induce the same reaction to the water molecules in your body as it does in food.
Wow.
As in, it can cook you.
Right.
But the concentration of the microwaves coming from the magnetron have to be right. They have to be directed in the right direction. You would have to be standing right next to a very badly leaking microwave, and even then probably in a room that propagates microwaves well, and even then you'd probably have to stay there for minutes to hours for anything to happen.
That's right. You'd know it's happening. You're not just going to get accidentally burnt by a microwave if it happens to be leaking. It's going to get hot, and
there are instances of kids being burnt by microwaves because they've tried to experiment with them. But in regular life, standing next to a microwave is not going to cook you. It's not going to give you cancer. It's not going to be any problem. In fact, the most common injury from microwaves is unevenly reheated food.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah. So whether that's through burning or parasites that haven't been killed because the temperature's not high enough, they're much more likely to hurt you than any actual microwave exposure. The other thing is with a microwave oven, as soon as you open the door, the microwave's cut out, the magnetron stops, and as soon as the magnetron stops, the microwave stops.
So when you're reheating food, is there like a safe temperature that, like in particular, like when you're cooking chicken, 160 degrees is what you cook to, but then when you're reheating it, obviously you're not going to get to 160 degrees.
I don't know, but I think the idea is that once you've cooked it, you've killed any salmonella, for example, that was there. So the only other way is if you put raw chicken on your already cooked chicken and then reheated so you're not going to, unless there's some other secondary introduction of salmonella, say, to your chicken, it'll just be your regular parasites and they'll get killed by temperatures of boiling water, basically. So,
That's right. There's not many bacteria that can survive above 100 degrees Celsius.
55 degrees, isn't it?
yeah, it's something around there. I'm not exactly sure what the number is, but it would vary slightly between organisms. But yeah, it would be somewhere between 55 and 70 degrees would be my guess.
So then when you take food out of the microwave and it's warm, it's actually the food that's conducted all that heat.
That's right. Which is why you can put a plastic container in there, for example, and still touch the sides of it that haven't been exposed to the food.
Yeah, I don't even have a microwave.
Don't you?
No, I did when I was living in share houses, but then I just never ended up buying one.
Is it because you're worried about the radiation?
No, I just never got around to getting one. And then if I reheat something, I either chuck it in the oven or in a saucepan. Does the same job, just takes a little bit longer sometimes. But
yeah, right. Go you.
But then reheating stuff in the oven tends to reheat it a bit nicer.
It does.
Definitely is nicer. Yeah, reheating it in the microwave, like I said before, it always goes sloppy.
Yeah, like I'll reheat my lunch at work in the microwave, but then nothing at home.
Matt's made us all sick by making us sit through a segment on microwaves. So maybe now we need something to cure us. And
how exactly have I made you sick? Please explain that attempt at a joke.
Microwaves are dangerous, man. They zap you and
the whole point of that
skin
segment was to try and tell you that microwaves are not dangerous.
All right,
were you even listening?
It was my attempt at a segue.
It's a really bad one. Get better. Hey, Sam, do you want a job?
Oh, yeah, I'm in.
Yeah,
No worries.
Cool. That's it. I'm done.
You had one job.
One job, and I've done it. Sam's turn now.
Sweet.
We can make fun of the human biologist.
Hey, I don't appreciate that term. Dr. Human Biologist, thank you.
Dr. Human Biologist.
With Sam's help, we're talking about supplements this week. Not talking about the type of supplements that you might use if you're a bodybuilder. I'm not talking about protein or creatine or anything like that, although we might touch on it. Mainly, we're talking about vitamin and mineral supplements and everything in between that doesn't really fit into either of those categories. So I've got to admit, straight up, I've been guilty. I've taken supplements before, and I really had no reason to move into this. Supplements are easy. They sort of seem like a cure-all. You can go and pick them off the shelf at your local chemist or even a supermarket, and they seem quite medicated, and you don't need a prescription for them, and they seem like they're going to help you whether or not you've got anything wrong with you. It's almost like a cover-all.
I like taking vitamin C because I like having very expensive pee.
That's right.
And you can make it all like kinds of kind of crazy colours and stuff. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, vitamin B is great for that. The fluoro yellow.
Yeah.
So I assume there are other reasons why people take them other than just having funky coloured pee.
Yeah, I hope so. There's a few that we commonly prescribe as for patients, like calcium, vitamin D. Pretty much everyone over the age of about 75 is on calcium, vitamin D supplements because they're quite good for bone health.
So there is a real world application for them. I guess before we get too deep into it, we sort of got to define. There's just a few things that I want to just run through a bit of a definition for. So firstly, dietary supplement essentially is a product taken orally containing one or more ingredients that is designed to add or enhance one's diet or to supplement one's diet. So they can come in many forms: tablets, powders, capsules, even drinks. And then there's the term vitamin. Vitamin is an organic molecule essential to proper body function, and organic is a chemistry terminology pertaining to a specific group of chemicals. I'm not talking about organic
farming,
food or organic farming. There'll be another episode on that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be.
Fun little fact, though, vitamin, the name vitamin actually was first established in 1912 by a Polish scientist who's got a pretty cool name, Casimir Funk. He ran an experiment where he fed chickens a diet that was deficient in a certain substance, and he found that they suffered nerve inflammation, and he was able to isolate that chemical, and initially he named it vitamine because he thought it was an amine. Turned out not to be, and he said it was vital to life. So the E was later dropped when it was discovered that it was not an amine, and vitamins don't need to be amines, but that's basically the nomenclature.
So do we know anything about this Funk guy? Did he smell bad?
That's just his cool Polish name.
Some of the things that we call vitamins, I mean, they actually have chemical names. Like vitamin C is actually ascorbic acid, and vitamin D that we prescribe is cholecalciferol. So they're kind of names that we've given to them.
Probably just for the ease of referring to them rather than...
That's right.
I believe the name vitamin A, B, C, D, E were given in order. They're basically arbitrary names in order of discovery, and then except vitamin K. Vitamin
K is actually... just a different off-the-topic thing. Vitamin K is actually important in the blood clotting cascade.
Right.
So, like, we give high-dose vitamin K to reverse some medications.
Right.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
The last thing that I want to define is mineral. So, strictly speaking, minerals are naturally occurring inorganic substances, and it can basically refer to anything that we dig out of the ground or the elements that make up our atmosphere. So, hydrogen, nitrogen, copper, iron, calcium, lead, uranium, these are all minerals. But in a dietary sense, there's 5 major minerals, and these are calcium, phosphorus, potassium, sodium, and magnesium. So those are the major minerals. The other elements that are found in the human body are considered trace elements, and these consist of sulfur, iron, chlorine, cobalt, copper, zinc, manganese, molybdenum, iodine, and selenium.
I'm surprised that iron is a trace element given that blood is iron, isn't it?
It's incredible when you look at the breakdown of a human body and the percentage of that is these minerals. an incredibly small amount of it is actually iron.
But yeah, as you say, it is an important part of our body. Like it's
Of course,
an
yeah.
essential part of red blood cells.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So it's just that there's so much other stuff that the iron is considered trace.
That's right.
Right.
So, if you're considering starting course of a supplement, it's going to take you a long time probably to choose. I had a look online at some online supplement stores, and I saw all of your standard vitamins, A, B, C, D, E. I saw your mineral supplements, and there was some that I'd never heard of before, or I didn't know that you could actually use as a supplement.
Ooh, run them by me.
Some of these were bee pollen, beef liver, chlorophyll, which, as you know, is the chemical that allows plants to photosynthesize, deer antler velvet, green-lipped sea mussel, shark cartilage, and something called royal jelly.
I don't want to know what royal jelly is.
What was the green lip one?
Yeah, green-lipped sea mussel.
What makes it have green lips?
Oh, it's a green lip. It's just an
The
organism.
chlorophyll supplements, probably.
That's right. It's full of chlorophyll. I was particularly intrigued by the royal jelly because I'd never heard of it before.
It sounds real sus.
I had to get into it, and I read the description of it was contains life-forming, highly nutritional complex of nature's superfood that the queen bee feeds on and incredibly lays over 2,000 eggs per day. That is a description on the royal jelly.
That sounds amazing.
I'm not sure what this means. It doesn't actually say what it does, but it does contain ginseng.
It's a superfood, though.
That's right. It's set in honey and it contains ginseng. So
are they actually supplements though, or are they just weird foods? Yes.
I'm hoping Sam can comment more on this, but I believe they're just strange foods. It's that kind of thing that if you put anything in a supplement bottle and you use the word may assist in X, people are going to buy it. So I guess just maybe a quick rundown on how vitamins and minerals actually work in the human body. Like physiologically, what do they actually do? I'm aware that each one will have a different effect or a different role, but just in general, what sort of role do they perform?
That's pretty difficult to say actually, because they're all, as you say, they'll have completely different uses in the body. They're all an essential part of physiology, and either like in a cellular level or as part of a cell makeup or part of how neurons work, or there's a huge range. It's pretty hard to say specifically. Yeah,
okay. Yeah, so there's a huge amount of bodily functions that do rely on vitamins and minerals, of course. How do we get them into our body? It's, I guess, our diet is what dictates how much of these vitamins and minerals we actually intake, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all to do with your diet. You're not going to get them any other way other than in your diet.
So something like green leafy vegetables or red meat's high in iron, citrus is high in vitamin C, almonds, salmon, milk, dairy's high in calcium, I guess.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Which leads me to the next question, I guess, is how do deficiencies form? If somebody's got a deficiency, say, in iron, is it not enough to simply eat more foods that contain iron?
Again, it's different for every vitamin or mineral, but generally, a lot of these deficiencies are either not enough intake or too much output. So some things can be excessively excreted by the kidneys or by the liver, and that can be from a whole host of different things like hormonal disorders. The other, probably the main thing that we see is reduced absorption in the gut. That can be an issue with with different vitamins and minerals, and that can be from either from genetic factors or from certain gastrointestinal disorders.
Okay, so commonly you would see a deficiency in somebody who is not just eating wrong, but they actually have a medical issue.
Yeah, quite often it comes down to diet, really. That the people who are not eating particular foods very common, like that's a long-term issue. So that deficiency builds up over time. It's rarely something that happens immediately.
Okay. Does a deficiency need to be diagnosed medically, or can I just sort of think I'm feeling a bit lethargic, or my skin's particularly bad this month? I've probably got a deficiency in vitamin X.
Vitamin X, that sounds like an X-Men sort of. I'm starting to mutate. I have an abundance of vitamin X.
Write a comic about it.
I haven't heard of vitamin X yet. I'm sure that'll come up sometime soon.
It hasn't been discovered yet.
Ultimate superfood. For the diagnosis of deficiency, you need to have it clinically diagnosed.
So it's like most things, if you self-diagnose without any experience, you're unlikely to make an accurate diagnosis.
Yeah, and I won't go into this because that's a whole different thing, but the amount of information available on the internet is both fantastic and terrible. And it has to do with the quality and the availability of it. So,
that's right. We've spoken about this before, and the rise of the internet has meant that there is so much fantastic information. There's all these truths out there, but you have to sift through all of this misinformation as well, which makes it really difficult to determine what's real and what's false, which is where you need to turn to somebody like Matt and Levi and their guests on IdioFacto.
That's right. Absolutely. It's where I get all my information from.
Exactly. This is the truth.
Speaking of evidence, Sam, I realise that you're a medical doctor and are therefore far more qualified than either Levi or I are to talk about this sort of stuff. But you mentioned evidence earlier. Did you find any to back your facts?
Yeah, so we got onto the topic of supplements. I thought, great, I'll have a look around. I started looking at one of the ones I see most commonly used, which is fish oil.
Yep.
And I spent the entire time just sifting through fish oil.
Well, that's probably quite a good model to look at, though, because the story's going to be the same for most supplements.
Yeah.
Would I be right in saying that? So if we look at fish oil as a model of the evidence that's out there and the pseudoscience that's out there, that's probably a good way of looking at it.
That's right. But fish oil is incredibly common. Almost everybody's cupboard, you open it up and next to the Panadol or the Nurofen is a bottle of fish oil.
Fixes everything.
It's pretty lucrative, that business as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I had a look into fish oil. Basically, first was commonly used as cod liver oil in the 19th century as a source of vitamin D for kind of sun-deprived children, which actually it is quite a good source of vitamin D.
Right.
And you still do see cod liver around, but it's generally just fish oil now.
So at that stage, I guess it was used to treat a vitamin deficiency, and it was just a source of vitamin D. So we may call this vitamin D if it were, to have the same use today. Whereas fish oil seems different. It's called fish oil. Fish oil almost is the supplement itself that you're after, and it has all these added benefits and omega-3 fatty acids and things like that are a superfood, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, it all kind of changed when some observational studies found kind of low rates of heart disease deaths among Greenland Eskimos who obviously consume a lot of seafood. And that's kind of where it branched off into different areas. And these days it's kind of used for many claims, mostly around heart health and inflammatory kind of conditions as well. And yeah, fish oil was targeted as the cause of the low heart disease because of the omega-3 fatty acids found in it. So there are 3 omega-3 fatty acids needed for humans. All got long names. I'll abbreviate them to ALA, EPA, and DHA. All 3 are essential components of the cell membrane. ALA can't be synthesized by the body, so it must be taken in by the diet, and that's found in seeds, nuts, lots of common vegetables. Essentially, vegetable oil, you'll have ALA. Whereas EPA and DHA can be synthesized from ALA, but only quite small amounts, so it's a lot easier to get them through the diet.
Right.
EPA, DHA found in high concentrations in fish oil. The Heart Foundation and the World Health Organization actually recommend 2 to 3 serves of fish per week as part of their healthy diet, which provides an equivalent of 250 to 500 milligrams per day over the week. Because of the absorption and the half-life of EPA and DHA, they'll kind of stay in the body as EPA and DHA for about 3 days. So you don't have to have a serve every day to keep up the same amount.
Okay.
And also the recommendation is 1 gram of ALA daily, which is pretty easy to get through, seeds, nuts, vegetables, all that sort of stuff.
1 gram is not much.
No, not at all. So that's 250 to 500 milligrams per day is the recommendation. How much fish oil do we find in a supplement? in one tablet of fish oil supplement, there's generally between 300 to 500 milligrams of EPA and DHA in varying ratios. It's actually quite important to read the fine print on these supplements. For instance, Blackmore is one of the more popular ones. On the label, it says a 500 milligram capsule of fish oil. And then in smaller writing underneath that, it says equivalent to 330 milligrams of triglycerides. And then in the even smaller print on the back, it says 150 milligrams of EPA and 150 milligrams of DHA.
Right.
So in a 500 milligram capsule, you're actually getting 300 milligrams. So then probably the next important question is how much, I mean, it sounds like a pretty good amount. That's your recommended amount daily, 250 to 500 milligrams, getting 300. Mm-hmm. Yep. So how much do you get in fish? So in one serve of salmon, you get 1.2 to 2.2 grams of fish oil.
Right. So about 4 or 5 times the amount.
Yeah. And salmon is quite a high fish oil source because it's quite an oily fish.
Right.
Tuna, for example, even in canned tuna, you get around 300 milligrams in a serve, but fresh tuna can be up to 1.5 grams. Most fish is kind of around between 200 milligrams to 1.5 grams per serve. Basically, the oilier, the better. Things like sardines, quite high amounts.
Yeah, but then you have to eat sardines, and that's disgusting.
Yeah, that's true. That's a very good point. Easier just to pop a pill, right?
Yeah, well, and that's the next question that I have is people who don't like to eat fish, they don't like the smell, or they don't like the taste, or whatever. Is there enough of these omega-3 fatty acids in other parts of your diet so that if you don't eat fish, you still wouldn't need to be taking fish oil? For example, if you eat a whole lot of chicken, are you likely to get enough omega-3, even though there's a lot lower percentage in chicken than there is in fish?
Yeah, so essentially you won't really get enough through other sources, but you could, if you had a lot of ALA, which is the other amino acid, the other fatty acid, yeah, you could synthesize enough, theoretically.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and the ALA is found in?
Basically vegetables, nuts, seeds, high amounts in like flaxseed.
Right.
So can the human body readily synthesize these fatty acids if you do have a high enough concentration of these ALAs in your diet?
Yeah, so I think I'd have to look it up, but I think it's about 5% can be converted to EPA and DHA. So you would need quite a large amount of ALA in your diet, really. But it is possible if you had enough.
So there is an argument to say that taking a fish oil tablet every couple of days for someone who never eats fish is potentially beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. So something that a lot of people kind of skip over in the whole area of, all these tablets is it's a supplement. So it's not something essential, but it's a supplement to your diet. If you're not getting enough from the dietary source, then this is how you supplement that. So, yeah.
So it is potentially beneficial.
Oh my God. Actually, you know what? That's not bad. I'll give you that
one. That's a good one.
That's actually pretty good.
I enjoyed it. I'll pay that.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Should we get into some of the benefits of fish oil?
Go on.
I think so.
All right. Okay, so...
Sorry. Beneficial oil. Wow.
No, that was a good one. How long had you thought of that before you said it?
About 5 seconds. I was just waiting for a break in the conversation.
He was really hoping that you'd talk about fish oil in this episode so that he could come up with it. He's been thinking about it for weeks.
He's got one note written down on his show notes today.
Beneficial oil.
It's actually the reason that I wanted to start this podcast. I had this really awesome pun just brewing. How can I actually make this relevant?
Just had it written on the wall for years. Oh, dear.
Sorry, completely hijacked.
So the benefits of fish oil.
Yeah. So I decided to search this the way that a non-medical person would. So I went to Google and just wrote, what are the benefits of fish oil?
I feel ya. That's what we do every week.
Awesome.
Yeah. So basically, as with the kombucha last week, the first website that came up, healthline.com. Sounds pretty good.
Yep. Did they give you 8 evidence-based reasons for why fish oil is beneficial?
You know what? They actually gave 13 benefits of taking fish oil.
All right. We probably don't have time to go through all 13 of them, but take us through a couple of the more egregious ones.
So we'll go over them quickly.
Yep. Okay.
Cardiovascular benefits, including cholesterol and triglyceride lowering, blood pressure lowering, reduced plaque, stopping arrhythmias. treatment of mental disorders, including depression, anxiety, psychosis, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, weight loss,
Wow.
eye health, inflammation such as rheumatoid arthritis or inflammatory bowel disease, healthy skin,
Oh my God, what doesn't it
pregnancy and
help?
development, liver, ADHD, asthma, allergy risk, bone health.
Wow,
Those are all
that's-
the listed benefits of it. Sounds amazing.
That's the most, I think, of any of the pseudosciences we've done so far.
Yeah, it's a pretty exhaustive list. And like I've had discussions with patients and other doctors about fish oil before, and I have not heard of probably over half of this list as being beneficial.
Wow.
And all of those claimed benefits, but physiologically, the triglycerides in the fish oil are acting to form part of the cell membrane. Is that their role in the body?
Yeah.
I struggle to see how schizophrenia can be caused by a breakdown of the cell membrane.
Yeah, I don't think they've kind of pointed to it as the cause, as a deficiency as a cause. I think, especially with the cardiovascular health, it's just been shown that higher levels of intake.
Right, so it's the classic more is better argument.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, on Healthline, reference I don't know, like 100 and something articles. I didn't go through all of them, but I went through a lot of them, and they were all quite small study groups. Pretty questionable study design, that sort of thing, retrospective
pretty
reviews,
standard.
and every single claim starts with may help.
Yeah.
And even they've stated several times, you may only need supplements if you don't eat enough fish.
Yeah.
Right. And that fits with sort of this journal article that I found, published in the Journal of American College of Cardiology, and it was studying vitamins and multivitamins in the prevention and treatment of cardiovascular disease.
Yeah.
And basically it found some very poor quality evidence that showed very small benefits. But remember, it's poor quality evidence. Mostly, though, it found no effect or even an increased risk of cardiovascular disease with some supplements.
Yeah, and it's it's quite a similar story with most of the claims against fish oil, that there really doesn't show any benefit across most of these domains. So the mental disorders, I didn't find anything beneficial. Weight loss, actually, some studies have shown that it can increase weight rather than help with weight loss.
Right.
Most skin conditions, it didn't show any either a low quality may provide a bit of benefit, but then any decent studies haven't really shown any good quality evidence.
Yeah, I think that's the general trend with these sorts of things, is that the more controlled the study, the lower the effect. And
the larger the sample group as well.
Yeah, so a large sample group with a carefully controlled study usually shows very little to no effect.
Yeah, that's right.
And an experiment showing positive results generally is found to have a poor scientific design or poor quality of evidence.
Yeah. The physiology behind fatty acids and cardiovascular risk is quite sound, though. Essentially, high levels of triglycerides, high levels of total cholesterol, and high levels of bad cholesterol, which is LDL, have significant associations with lots of conditions, but especially cardiovascular disease and strokes. Yeah, so essentially, EPA and DHA are good cholesterol. It's essentially the way they work. So good intake of EPA and DHA, which are the omega-3 fatty acids, help lower your cholesterol and especially lower your LDL cholesterol. So there was a Cochrane review actually published in November last year.
Hey, Cochrane.
Yeah, Cochrane, place to go. Which looked at, the title of that was Polyunsaturated Fatty Acids for the Primary and Secondary Prevention of Cardiovascular Disease, which is essentially looking at omega-3 fatty acids. So it was looking at higher versus lower intake of polyunsaturated fatty acids. So the polyunsaturated fatty acids we look at are fish oil, omega-3, and plant oils, omega-6. So this study combined 49 randomized controlled trials, so a total of 24,272 patients.
That's huge.
Yeah, the huge numbers, and it was durations over 1 to 8 years, which are quite long studies. 8-year studies you rarely see, just because of the expense and commitment from the people involved. Some of the trials included supplementation. Actually, most of them included supplementation, but 8 were just with dietary advice for higher intake, and 8 gave supplemental foods. like nuts or margarine high in omega-3. And then 3 of the studies used a combination of supplementation and dietary advice.
Because I guess that's it. I mean, foods that naturally contain these chemicals that you're trying to...
Yeah, you're self-supplementing by eating more fish, basically. Yeah,
That's right. Yeah, they're a natural supplement, I guess, aren't they?
They didn't actually compare like supplement versus no supplement because it's quite difficult to do that. You'd have to know exactly what someone is having in their diet to be able to tell if they actually need that supplementation or not.
Yeah, and it's hard enough to do studies over 8 years with people who are compliant and helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before you ask them to keep a food diary for that long as well.
Yeah, exactly. But basically, they compared high intake groups, which had to have at least 10% higher intake than the lower intake group, which was a control group.
Right.
Basically, the results they found, there was moderate quality evidence for a couple of things. Probably slightly reduces the risk of coronary heart disease events. Again, that's moderate quality evidence, and the word probably starting isn't ideal. But that's over that amount of patients, it's reduced from 14.2% in the low intake group to 12.3% in the high intake group.
Okay.
And cardiovascular disease events overall from 14.6% to 13%. So essentially, moderate quality evidence is there's maybe a small improvement in heart disease.
It's about a 1% drop by the sounds of that.
Yeah, and that's not a defined, like not a definite conclusion either.
Okay.
But increasing intake had little to no effect on all-cause mortality, so it doesn't improve rates of death, essentially. Yeah, and there was some low-quality evidence that it might slightly reduce the risk of cardiovascular death and stroke. But, yeah, again, very low-quality evidence with nothing conclusive. And that's with this meta-analysis of 24,000 patients across 49 different studies. So you're trying to remove as much bias as possible, basically. And they still couldn't really get any good conclusion there.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
That seems to be a fairly consistent picture. So given all that, would you recommend that a regular person would need to supplement their diet with vitamin C or fish oil or any multivitamins or anything like that? A regular healthy person with a varied diet who eats fish, meat, and vegetables.
Yeah, unless they've got another cause for a deficiency, and unless that deficiency's been medically diagnosed, I probably wouldn't recommend. I mean, there's some supplements at higher levels can actually be quite dangerous. So, yeah.
Yeah, right. Oh, I was going to ask that question, actually.
But yeah, basically, if you don't have a reason for a deficiency and you eat a healthy, varied diet, there's likely no need for a supplement unless you've been medically diagnosed with one.
So, and if you're worried that you do have a deficiency, you should go and see your GP and ask them to diagnose it.
Yeah.
That's right. Eat healthy food and see your GP if you get sick. It's as simple as that, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right. And getting a GP early is actually a great thing to do, just as a little side note, because then they know your history already and can, reference back to previous blood tests and all that sort of stuff. So.
Yeah, right.
Okay, yeah, that is good advice.
You should be a doctor or something, Sam.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Should try that, yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to say about supplements, Sam?
I would just say use them with caution. Most supplements are quite benign when used at the recommended dose, because if they were more risky, then they would have to be prescribed, basically. They wouldn't just be over the counter. But, yeah, even with fish oil, if there has been some very minimal benefit shown for some inflammatory diseases at higher doses, like at 10 capsules a day, but that level of capsules can actually give you an increased bleeding risk. Not
to mention a huge hit to your wallet.
To the wallet.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Quite expensive. So that's right. And don't take the word of the ad or of the label. Pharmaceutical companies, don't get me wrong, they have made a lot of things possible with the medicines they provide, but at the end of the day, they're there to make money. So they don't have your best interest at heart. They've got their bottom line at heart.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for joining us, Sam. It was
thanks for having me on, guys. Loved it.
No worries. Thanks. It's good to have someone who actually knows what they're talking about on.
Yep, and it was great. This is our first guest, and I'm hoping that we'll have many more guests. Possibly we'll even get you back, Sam.
Anytime.
That's it for this episode of IdioFacto. Forward all suggestions, hate mail, evidence and arguments to idiofacto@gmail.com.
And you can reach us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and all other social platforms at IdioFacto.
Links are in the show notes. Where do you find the show note?
On the podcast app.
I've never even looked at them. I should look at them.
Yeah, in the description.
I just trust your word that the things that you say are accurate.
Well, there's your first mistake.
Check your sources.
I'm going to start auditing.
Yeah.
Links are in the show.